One of our business partners was a customer first.
Okay.
I had never, I basically bought it sight unseen.
Richard, thanks for doing this with me. I appreciate it. Thanks for sitting down.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Tell us a little bit more about your coffee shop, the name, how it got started.
Yeah, just our history here. So this coffee shop's been here for a little over 7 years. We're the second owners. We bought it from the original owner 2 years ago, so like right in the middle of the pandemic. Really our motivation for buying it was we didn't want to see this place leave the neighborhood. Because we were worried that if it didn't sell and then he just closed it, like we had no idea what would come in. And honestly, like this place is so unique that we just wanted to protect it as a part of the neighborhood.
So that means you were a customer first.
One of our business partners was a customer first.
Okay.
I had never, I basically bought it sight unseen, me personally.
That much faith in your business partner.
Yeah, so my friend Drew, he lives up the street. He came in all the time, and it's literally like a Hallmark story. He was driving to work, stopped at the stop sign, and as he stopped at the stop sign, the previous owner was like hammering the for sale sign into the ground, and he immediately calls me and goes, "You want to buy a coffee shop?" And I was like, "I don't know, maybe. Let me make some phone calls." And by the end of the day, we had bought a coffee shop.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's just like the timing, and he was ready to sell it. Was it a decision he made because he's retiring, or is it just...
For him, he had started 2 businesses, and he just really enjoyed the other one more.
Yeah.
He had a landscaping company, and he had this coffee shop, and the landscaping company was getting busier, and he just enjoyed being outside and doing things with his hands. It was actually a thing we had to deal with when we first bought it, was that he would often just close up randomly. So the customers didn't ever know when it was going to be open. So he had his posted hours, but if he got bored or wanted to go do something or hadn't seen a customer for a few minutes, he would just
close shop.
Just bolt. So his customers kind of got used to if his truck was here, then he was here.
Oh wow!
And so that was one of the things that while we kept doing everything that he was doing, so we kept, the coffee, the tamales, and all the pottery. When we bought it from him, most of his sales and most of his inventory was based around the pottery, the yard art, home decor, stuff like that. And then there was a little bit of coffee, a little bit of grab and go corner store stuff. And we wanted to take the focus and move it towards the coffee and the food while keeping the pottery and keeping the whole concept behind what it was.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, because the pottery is the most attracting thing for me as well. Of course, we did talk about how beautiful it is on the outside, and when you walk in, especially on summer, right?
Yep.
And then summer, the vines are green,
Yeah,
and then there's a swing set. It kind of lights up as well. So
it's a little fairy tale-esque out there.
Yes.
This building is 240 years old.
Wow.
It was originally a bunkhouse for the railroad, and then it was a bakery, and I'm a little fuzzy about what it was after that. And then our landlord actually lived here and worked here for 20 years with his family.
Wow.
Yeah, so the ATM in the corner is a relic from the business that he ran out of here, because he did ATM sales and installs and maintenance and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
For some reason I thought that this was just, it looks like an extension of a house, right? It's almost as if, family got together and said, what should we do with this extra space that we got? We might as well just do a coffee shop as well, do tamales, and then the pottery as well.
I think that's actually kind of what happened with the original owner, because I was told that when he first leased it, he wanted to just run a corner store, candy bars, sandwiches, Cokes, And as his customer base grew, they kept asking him for stuff. And they'd be like, oh, can we get a coffee? And by the time so many people ask you for a coffee, you go get a coffee machine.
Yes.
And so then it kind of just grew organically from there. And then I think that he started bringing in, because he's from Puerto Vallarta. And so he, worked with vendors and artists from his home area and brought that up here. And we actually work with the same artist that he worked with when he started it.
For the pottery piece.
For the pottery.
That makes sense. Well, I mean, the tamales is something that is very unique to Kansas City. That is a Central American food, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, tamales. It's really interesting. So, my stepmom is from Chihuahua, Mexico, which is northern Mexico. And what a lot of people don't realize about tamales is that it's a lot deeper than what you realize. So, like Kansas City is known for its barbecue, and it has a specific style of barbecue. Well, then there's St. Louis barbecue and Memphis barbecue and Texas barbecue. What's the same thing for tamales? So there's, northern Mexico tamales, central Mexico tamales, eastern Mexico tamales, Oaxacan tamales, and then, and then you get into different countries and they'll all have their own specific styles of tamales that they use with what's around them. So like northern Mexico has a lot of corn. So they use corn for the masa, and they use corn husks to wrap the tamales. But then you go south into southern Mexico and Central America, they don't have corn anymore. So they use banana leaves and plantains or root vegetables for the dough for the tamale, and then to wrap it in banana leaves.
That makes sense. You see, I'm so familiar with the Central American tamales, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
Lived in D.C., you'd see a predominant presence of Central Americans like Honduras, El Salvador, and I'm so familiar with the taste of it. But when we came here and tasted it, it was a bit different.
Yep.
So I guess that explains why the taste is even different.
Yes, the masa ends up with a completely different texture when you do it in a corn husk to a banana leaf.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, so the pottery, what percentage of the, I don't want to say the revenue because that's your business, but how important is it in contributing to the day-to-day sales and operation of the business?
So there's a couple directions to go there, and one I'll start with a fun fact.
Yeah.
I was told that Kansas City is the second highest per capita coffee shop city in the nation.
I'll believe it. Oh, wow.
So that means that basically every street you're on, there's more than one coffee shop. Like even in just this little 5-mile radius, there's like 8 coffee shops. You have to be really good at it, but also, especially if you're a small shop, you often have to have coffee and something. So like we're coffee and tamales and pottery, and the shop down the street is coffee and plants, and then there's coffee and bakery and coffee and records or coffee and leather goods. So like that's a lot of what happens in Kansas City, is that a coffee shop has to differentiate itself from the other coffee shops around it, and depending on what you use for that differentiation is like the customers you're going to pull.
That's so true.
And so for us, the pottery is really important because it really works both ways. We advertise our pottery, online and in the Casey Gardner magazine, especially in the spring and some other places. And so the pottery is something that brings people into the coffee shop for the first time, and then they might try the drinks and try the tamales and become not only a once-a-year pottery buyer, but then a more frequent coffee buyer. But it has the same effect the other direction, where we'll get people to come in for coffee and tamales, and instead of it being a $5 purchase or a $10 purchase, it'll end up being a $50, $150, $300 purchase, because they come in for one coffee, they see all the stuff around, and by the time I've made their drink and they've paid for it, they're like, oh, I have to take that home, or I need that for a gift, or something along those lines.
Yes.
And so it really works for us both ways. It helps us as a low to medium volume coffee shop bring in enough money, because sometimes we get those like bonus sales with the pottery. Somebody comes in for a $3 coffee and walks out with $50 in pottery.
That is a very interesting piece, right? Because I didn't know that Kansas City had this many coffee shops per capita.
Yeah.
I suspected though, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen, like you said, coffee shops every other corner. One of the things that I've noticed recently, coffee shops have been closing. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Is it something that is related to how consumers are keeping an eye on how they're spending their money, or is it just the sheer competition is getting the best of them?
It's actually neither of those.
Wow.
All of the closures that I know of in like the last year, and it obviously I don't know about every single one of them, but the most recent one that I read about, it was because of a lease dispute. So they were making plenty of money to stay in business at their current locations, but the lease ended, the landlord wanted more money, they couldn't come to terms, and they have to close and move out. Or the one that I know before that's just up the hill, that was a health issue. The owner was getting older in age and started to develop some health issues, and so they couldn't manage multiple locations anymore, so they cut down only to their one location.
I see.
And I hear that story more than I hear that there's too much competition or that there's not enough sales.
I see.
So I think that as long as your product is good and you have a differentiation, that Kansas City is a coffee city. Like, there's enough support there. I mean, obviously you can get too many in an area and that can be difficult. But most of the stories I hear is actually it's all in the other category.
I see. Interesting. Is that one that we were talking about vested?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a very sad
coffee
shop to let go, because they are packed, amazing coffee.
Yeah.
The serving portion was proportionally bigger than most coffee shops that you go to. This morning we actually spent some time at Vested.
Nice.
And it was so sad to see that shop close. And you can see the sense of the sadness in the coffee shop.
Yeah, and I think that when the news got out, a lot of their customers wanted to come in for one last round before they closed.
Yeah.
There was another coffee shop that was the same situation, but they might have worked it out. It was one in Strawberry Hill that their lease was going to end, and they were trying to raise money to buy the building so that they could stay where they were, and I think they worked it out.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Do you see owning for coffee shops, especially that are established, might be a better approach overall? Or is it too risky to do that from the jump?
So it really depends on just where you're at financially. Obviously, buying a building that you're in is a lot of upfront cost, and then also the surprise maintenance cost.
Yeah.
So it's that same decision even for houses. Like,
yes,
if you buy it, then you have to be prepared for like those big, situations that always surprise you. And so as long as you are prepared for that, it can be a really great thing, especially like for us looking at buying our building. It already has other income streams tied into it because the second and third floor are rented out. So for us to buy our building isn't quite as scary because a lot of that cost, the monthly cost for what it would take to own the building is taken care of by the other income stream. And then we could work into growing into additional space if we wanted to, or we could leave it the way it is and just have more control. I actually ran into someone that's connected to the Rosedale Development Association. They introduced me. I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but they have a specific program where they help small businesses buy their buildings, because it is not only a big asset, but in the long run, it can reduce your operating costs. It's an asset that can give you more power when you need it. So, like if you think of like owning your house, something comes up, you can use your house as an asset for loans. You can use it. You can basically break into that equity.
Yes.
And it's no different for a business. So if you have that asset and you need to do some sort of large capital expenditure, you can tap into the asset that you have in order to take care of that. So it just gives you more flexibility and more funding routes than you might have if you didn't have that.
The property.
Because if you're looking at getting a loan, one of the things you got to look at is your income and your expenses and your assets.
Yes, absolutely.
And it changes the equation if you own your own building.
Oh, absolutely, it does. It gives you much more leverage, and I think it just makes you more an attractive candidate for any lender as well. If you have a property and you're owning it, and then you're renting, just like you said, I mean, multiple streams of income, and then your business itself is diversified to some extent with the food, the coffee for sure, and the pottery. So it probably is the best decision for a business like yours to certainly jump into purchasing the building that they rent. What are the challenges of coffee shops? What do you face on a day-to-day basis? I'm sure one of the challenges would be retaining talent, employees.
Yeah, that's one of them, because a lot of service industry is younger employees, and it's a lot of transitionary employment. You're doing just a summer between semesters, or half a year before you start college, or a year while you're figuring things out, or whatever those cases are. And it's not that. So as a business owner, you have to take into account I'm going to spend a lot of time and money on training for an employee that may or may not last very long. But I think that it's not the hardest thing that I've encountered here. This is my first restaurant / coffee shop that I've actually ever owned or worked in. So one thing I like to tell people when I'm telling the story is that I accidentally bought a restaurant. And one of the hardest things about this type of business is just how razor thin the margins really are. And we experienced that firsthand this year, where we had a couple of months that our sales numbers just went through the roof. We did almost double one month than the previous month. But we had, never done that much volume, so we didn't know how to handle it. And then the next month, we just kind of assumed it was going to stay the same way, and we overstaffed, and we actually basically lost all of the money that we made the next month because we overstaffed and and weren't quick enough to react to the changes. So with other companies,
So excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry. Do you know what the reason for the spike was? Any guesstimates? No.
There's no guess at all. There are trend lines for businesses for restaurants do exist, but you have to be in business for a little while to figure those out. So there are a couple of holidays that we know that we have to prepare for, and then there are a couple of social media personalities in Kansas City that we watch their stuff, and if they post about us, then we have to be prepared for a potential 1 to 2 week significant bump in traffic. So we watch for those two things specifically, but it makes it harder because we've been growing constantly since we started, and so for me, that's actually been the hardest part of the business. Is I've never gotten to get comfortable yet with kind of this is what I expect, this is what the trend is. So I know how much to buy, I know how much to staff, I know how to operate, because as soon as I figure out, this is how much food I need to make the next week, it's not enough. Or this is how much staffing it takes to get all of our production done for food and drink. And then the next month, I'm working, on the days off and before shift and after shift because it's just not quite enough yet. So I think the biggest challenges for me at this business are maybe a little atypical because of the extreme growth phase. Like when we bought it, it was, even though the business had been here for a long time, it was almost essentially like starting from scratch with customers. And so we basically started with, no baseline, and then have been growing ever since. And then the other part is that what you see is as big as this is. There's no huge hidden kitchen in the back. There's no huge hidden storage room. There's no walk-in freezer. So one of the difficulties for this specific business that is unique to it, because it's just a really small space, is we have to bring in product more often than we'd like to, and we have to make really small batches of everything because there's just no room for storage. If I make more than what I make now, there's just nowhere to put it.
That makes sense. Yeah, like you said, it's atypical, very, very unique. I would say across industries. So finding consistencies is something that you strive towards, maybe. Do you think
it would be nice?
Yes, I see. Ideally,
it would be
right?
nice,
yes.
But I still would like to put on, like I would like to do another 50 to 100% in growth next year. And once we hit that point, I think then we could probably exist really comfortably at that point.
Makes sense.
We would have, enough income coming in that we could be staffed comfortably where people wouldn't be overworked, where there'd be enough people to cover, shifts when things come up. Because that's one of the difficulties now, is if somebody's sick or somebody has to call out, or whatever the situation is, it's the owners covering all of the shifts, because there just aren't very many employees
that are there. Yeah. It's definitely.
And so when there's not very many employees, that's an extra hidden difficulty, is shift coverage.
No, for sure.
Because I think just me personally as a business owner, one of my goals is to treat my employees the way that I've liked to have been treated. And so if you need to do something as what is seemingly benign as getting a haircut, do it. I don't feel like I should try to add stress to your life by making it really difficult for you to do the chores that it takes to maintain your life. So you need to go to the doctor, you need to get an oil change, you need to get a haircut. Just tell me and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So it's just something that I've always done with all the businesses that I've run, but it does make it more difficult on me personally in order to do that. But that's the burden that business owners decide to take on.
But do you find people kind of stay committed to you because of that connection that you can foster with an employee? Because I recently sat down with two different leaders, right? One was a very strict, stern leader. This is your job responsibility. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, we're going to sit down and really coach you on that. And if you don't do X, Y, and Z, the next steps will be to completely terminate you. On the other side, there are leaders like yourself that really are trying to be understanding and really try to appeal to the emotion side of an employee. How do you balance those two?
So I will say that there's no right answer to that question.
Yes.
Because just like there are many different leadership styles, there are many different personalities with employees. And what you have to realize is that it's the combination of those two that make a successful position, make a successful shift, make a successful business. So if you have a certain leadership style and you hire people that don't work well with that style of leadership, that style of training, that style of accountability, then there's going to be clashes, there's going to be misunderstandings, there's going to be people that feel like they're not doing a good job, but it's not really their fault from both angles. And so it's one of those things where hiring is even more important, because you have to try to make this split, basically this split-second decision, because you can't spend months finding the perfect candidate in this kind of industry, because you have to, I have 3 positions open and I can't work that many shifts. So I have to find somebody quickly before I burn out.
Right.
And so you have to find somebody who's not only available and may or may not have some of the skills you're looking for, experience, but that will fit into your culture. Because if the fit is right, then I think that's what makes them loyal. Because if they're enjoying it, if they're feeling like they're contributing, if they're feeling fulfilled, then that's why they stay.
Yes.
Yeah, they stay for the pay because everybody has to pay rent and buy food. But you can make that money in many different ways.
I agree.
And so it has to be something that you want to do, but also somewhere that you fit in.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, okay, let's compare small coffee shops like yours to the big boys in town like Starbucks and Parisi. What is the dynamic and what is the competition scope like?
So I think on one hand, it is a matter of what's your objective. So we often see, so our trends are affected by the weather on like a small scale. So if it's colder, we're slower. If it's rainy, we're slower. If it's really, really nice out, super busy. And part of that's because we don't do things very fast and we don't have a drive-through. So our customers that don't want to deal with the weather between our door and their car door will choose to go to one of the other like bigger places when that's the situation. Or we have customers that will make the conscientious decision of like stopping here or going down the street because we're not necessarily the fastest drink in town. And so like if they're really busy, they'll make a choice to go through a drive-through or to a faster service because that's what they're looking for.
Right.
I think that the other difference is, I'm not going to say like quality or service, because you're going to get great service whether you're here or at another coffee shop, no matter what the size is, as long as it's being ran well and the employees are doing, a good job. But I think it's really about the experience that person wants to have, and then also like the drinks you fall in love with. So like we have unique drinks that are hard to find, and I think that's one of the things that, one of the questions that comes up, I'm kind of going to jump on you, is would I ever open a second location of this? And my answer is always absolutely not. Because this is such a unique concept that it's a combination of the building, the location, the decor, the offering, and I couldn't recreate this experience, this feeling, in a strip mall. This is here. That's the only place it lives.
I agree.
The second reason that I would not open a second location of this is because I would be putting myself in danger of putting myself out of business. The more unique your concept is the farther your draw is, and potentially the less frequent your customer clientele is. So when you're one of the big players like Starbucks, your frequency is super high and your draw is super narrow. You're super close. Nobody is going to drive 15 extra minutes, 30 extra minutes, an hour to go to their favorite Starbucks. They're going to go to Starbucks because it's close, it's convenient, and fast. People come here because they want a very specific thing that they love, and they want the experience of being here. And people will drive hours to do that.
Great. I agree totally.
So that's, I think the biggest difference is that it's just it's a completely different concept.
It is unique. It is very unique, and just like you said, I think I've never seen it like this, but when you are, it's almost specializing, right?
It is.
So it's like a medical doctor, let's say they specialize in something, they're not going to see every client that walks into the, or a patient that walks into the door.
Yeah.
They're going to, people will drive from,
Yeah.
because they need that service.
Yeah, and it's the same way. I think we had some people that drove in 2.5 hours a couple weekends ago just because they wanted to have Champorado. And they had a family member that came in, had it, and said it brought back memories from their childhood. And so the next weekend, they had family members that drove up from out of town and visited for the day and came in to have that one specific drink. And I think they drove from like 2.5 hours away.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is really amazing. That makes you unique, absolutely. I guess you kind of answered my question for me, because I was thinking or maybe let me ask this question: how can you get 3B's out there? What platforms are you using right now currently?
Right now, we do a little bit of traditional marketing because of the connection to the pottery, and then landscaping and gardening and things like that. So we carry the Casey Gardner magazine, which is a really unique, independently owned and operated magazine that's local to Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And since we carry their magazine, we also advertise in it. Yes. But because of the pottery, it does what it's supposed to do, which, especially in the spring and summer months, it brings in some people from further away to get the really unique things for their plants. Yes. We do, your traditional social media marketing. We post on Facebook and Instagram. We do, we pay attention to all of the rating sites. So we're really active on, Google Review and Yelp and TripAdvisor to make sure that anyone who's commenting there is getting a quick reply and a meaningful reply. It's not just like thanks every single time. Every single reply is personalized because we're reading it and we're replying to it because it's something that matters to us. And one of my favorite things to do is when the reply is, especially when it's specific to one of the employees or an experience that they had and I know who was there, I always share that with my employees. Yes. So that they can, come full circle and get to realize that they were part of an important experience for somebody else. The biggest thing that we want to move into is, I don't know the correct word for it, but it's in the category of outbound sales. So we're set up to do catering, we're set up to do outdoor events, and we would like to get, our goal for next year is to do more festivals. So we did, the last 2 years we've done one charity event and one festival per year, and our goal for next year is to go from one per year to one per quarter. And to add on either like a permanent like food truck kind of situation, either at a golf course or a farmer's market or a distillery or something like that, where you see those like food trucks and food tents set up. Because in my head, it is marketing that really pays for itself. I can pay $400 or $1,000 for a vendor booth at a carnival or a state fair or whatever it is, and I'm going to make all of that money back that day and more, plus gain all of the exposure. For sure. Or I can spend $1,000 on a billboard, which won't even buy a billboard, and get none of that money back immediately that day. I'll get some exposure, but not the same kind of exposure. Because when you're at a farmer's market, people are not only seeing, your stuff, but a lot of them are actually eating it and drinking it for the first time and building a deeper connection to your brand in that one little encounter than you get from, a billboard or a radio commercial or traditional marketing. So my goal is to do more of that outdoor stuff, that more of the event marketing, but that will put even more strain on our kitchen. Like the festival that we do every year, Tamale Fest. The last year we sold as many tamales in one day as we were selling in 2 weeks at that point. So it'll be a whole thing to figure out how to manage that additional production need.
Which relates back to employees. Right, to some extent, resources. Right? Employees,
a little bit of funding. Like we have some plans to renovate our kitchen space to get in a little more equipment and some more prep space. But all of that takes money.
Yeah.
So you either save up for it or you
get investment.
Yeah,
one way or another.
Or funding. Yeah.
Yes, one way or another. That makes sense. All right. So how can people reach you? Get in contact? Your location, website. channels.
Yeah, so our website and our handle on all of our social media is 3Bs KCK. The name comes from a Hispanic saying, which is bonito, bueno, barato, which is good, pretty, affordable.
3Bs.
Yeah, that's the 3Bs. And that was the original owner's mom's like mantra.
Okay.
So that was how she lived her life, by the 3Bs.
Okay, that makes
And
sense.
so he named it in honor of his mom.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It kind of sticks out as well. It's like,
Yeah.
I think of bees, actual bees,
Yes.
but it's like I'm you know, when I think of 3Bs, I think of you, I think of your mom, and I think of maybe your business partner or another brother
Yeah.
of yours. Say.
Yep.
So I just see the family connection, but I
Yeah.
didn't really know that was the reason behind it.
I have plans to make some shirts that are like a play on the phrase, like
Yes.
the 3Bs. Some of them with the real phrase, and then some of them with other things like birria breakfast burrito, or
There you go.
you know, other phrases that go with the 3Bs, and just keep playing on that sort of thing. Yeah, but they can find us, you know, either if they're in Kansas City, they can come to our location, which is on Southwest Boulevard.
Yes.
They can find us on social media at 3Bs KCK, and it's the same as our website, 3Bs KCK.
Sweet. One last question before we wrap this up. What would you recommend to a person that is interested in opening up a coffee shop in Kansas City? First couple of weeks, what do you think they need to have in place before getting there? Is it a deeper question?
That's like a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
I remember a few months ago, I had somebody sitting outside and they asked me that same question, and we talked for like 30, 45 minutes.
I see.
I would say
Just 1, 2, 3 things.
Yeah, the first thing is you need to have enough money to cover 6 to 12 months of expenses as you build up your clientele. And you don't have to have like the entire expense covered, because you're going to gain customers slowly, but it starts out slow and it is a parabolic curve, because as you gain momentum, it's one of those things. They'll start talking, and so then they tell people, and then they come in and they tell more people. So it's going to start really slow and then go from there. The second thing is you can combat that by being really well organized with some sort of marketing exposure right at the go. So grand opening, influencer, that sort of stuff. If you can jumpstart your clientele from day one, it'll help fight that problem of, which I think is the hardest thing for any small business, is underestimating how much money you need to run the business until you get enough clientele to pay for the business. Because if your customers aren't paying for the business, you are. And then the last tip that I would have is to have practiced everything that you do. Write it down, write out the instructions, and practice it how you've written it down. Because in the moment, if you get rushed, like, you're going to want to be able to fall back to a practice routine. And so if you're just starting out from scratch and you don't have those things practiced and you don't know where your supplies are, it's going to take you even longer to do what you're supposed to be doing than you should, or you could make mistakes and have consistency problems and provide a bad experience. So enough funding, plan out your marketing before you open to coincide with your opening to jumpstart your clientele, and then practice before you start.
Oh, fantastic. Sweet. Thank you, Richard.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.